first thing I noticed was how quiet the strip looked when you weren't part of it. All that neon and noise, all the polished illusion of order, and from the outside it just sat there like a glowing monument to people who still pretended the world made sense. Bennett and I stood just beyond the Securitron checkpoint, hands in pockets, weapons slung more casually than regulation ever would have allowed. One of the machines rolled past us, its screen flashing a hollow cartoon smile. "Enjoy your stay, citizen," Bennett snorted. "Maybe I'll send it a thank you card." "Pretty sure it'd just fine you for emotional misconduct," I muttered. We stepped away from the strip and let Freeside swallow us in. The change came quick. Less music, less polish, more dust, more real voices. The kind that didn't try to sell you anything except maybe the promise that tomorrow could still exist. This was leave. Not shore leave. Not real freedom. Just enough rope to remember why we fought for borders on a map that hadn't meant anything in 200 years. Bennett nudged me with his elbow. Better than sitting in McCarran staring at the same concrete every day. "Low bar," I said. We wandered for no real reason. That was the luxury. Past a junk stall, a man tuning a guitar held together with scavenged wire, a kid trying to hawk bottles of warm soda like it was vintage whiskey. Freeside didn't pretend. It endured. There was something honest in that. Then the laughter cut through. Not normal laughter. Not relief or joy. Just that sharp, twitchy sound that always carried a wrong edge with it. Two fiends stumbled out from between half-collapsed storefronts, arguing about who'd hidden the jet last time, eyes wide and unfocused, movements jittery and erratic. One shoved the other hard enough to knock him into a broken metal sign. Bennett slowed his pace. "Hell of a way to live. Hell of a way to die, too," I said. They barely noticed us. Just kept rambling, muttering, laughing at nothing. Their attention already drifting to the next stimulant, the next hit. The next moment their nerves decided reality was optional. That's when someone spoke behind us. "World's ugly, ain't it?" The voice carried a lazy confidence, the kind that didn't care if you respected it or not. We turned. Three men leaned against the wall of a building like they owned it by default. Greased back hair, leather jackets, faded jeans. White shirts stretched tight across lean frames. The style was unmistakable even if the world had changed twice over. Kings. The one in the middle pushed off the wall and stepped forward, hands loose at his sides, posture casual but eyes sharp. "Name's Rico," he said. "And before you worry, relax. We ain't here to start anything." "Good," Bennett replied. "We're off duty, not suicidal." Rico gave a small half-smile. "Shame. City could always use more entertainment." His gaze flicked briefly toward the direction the fiends had wandered off. "Those creeps been getting bold lately," he added. "Snatched one of our people's friends. Follower Doc. Dragged her west. Posted up in that old rundown motel." The tone changed slightly. Less casual. Still controlled. "They got her cooking chems for him," he continued. "Got a real talent for turning doctors into tools." Bennett glanced at me. Just a quick look. A question wrapped in the smallest movement of his brow. I already knew what it meant. Rico noticed it too. "We're gonna go have a talk with him," he said. "Not asking you boys to carry our flag or nothing. Just figured since you're already out stretching your legs, maybe you don't hate the idea of keeping a good person from getting carved up." He let that hang there. No pressure. No orders. Just truth. I looked past him. West into where the lights thinned and the buildings slouched lower, like the city itself was tired of pretending. Bennett gave a slow breath through his nose. "Guess we weren't doing anything important," he said. Rico's grin widened just a touch. "Didn't think you were." He turned and started walking. The other kings fell in beside him, boots scraping the pavement with that casual confidence people had when they knew their streets better than anyone else ever would. Bennett and I followed, and the strip faded behind us. We moved west with the kind of rhythm that only comes from people who've walked the same broken ground 100 different ways. Freeside didn't end so much as it slowly unraveled. The lights dulled. The chatter faded into low, scattered murmurs. Buildings leaned closer together, like they'd grown tired of holding themselves upright. The pavement cracked into jagged seams where weeds clawed stubbornly through decades of neglect. The Kings walked like they belonged to every inch of it, not with military precision, not with nervous caution either. Just a familiar, owned swagger, like the street itself had been theirs long before anyone bothered to ask. Rico gestured ahead with his chin. Motel's just past the old Market Row. Used to be a real dump even before it turned into a junkie clubhouse. Fiends don't pick places with taste, Bennett said. Nah, Milo replied. Just places that don't mind getting ruined twice. As we moved, the smell crept in stronger. Chems, rotting fabric, old food left too long in warm air. The sort of scent that told you people didn't come here to rest. They came here to disappear. We passed a few locals who kept their eyes down and their backs turned, pretending nothing around them mattered. One old man watched us go by with tired resignation, like he'd already seen how this sort of night ended, and didn't care to witness another version. The motel rose into view shortly after. It looked like an exhausted animal trying not to collapse. Rust crawled along every exposed beam. Broken windows gaped like open wounds. The sign flickered weakly above the lot, half its letters shattered or missing, leaving only a dim, uneven glow that told you it once tried to be inviting. A handful of scorched vehicles sat abandoned near the entrance, their frames gutted and stripped long ago. Scattered debris cluttered the lot. Empty inhalers, tipped bottles, scraps of cloth and stained plastic. Bennett let out a low breath. Nice place, he muttered. Real cozy. Rico's voice dropped slightly. They're mostly holding up in the back wing. Doctor will be inside somewhere, probably wherever they can keep her scared and upright. His eyes flicked toward the darkened corridors beyond the entrance. Once we step in, it ain't gonna stay quiet, Duke added. Wasn't expecting tea and conversation, I said. Rico nodded once. Good, because when it gets messy, don't start yelling like you're storming Hoover Dam. Just move when I say move, and keep your head screwed on straight. Bennett nudged my side. Your specialty? Funny, I replied. Thought my specialty was surviving your ideas. He smirked faintly. Let's test that theory. Rico shifted his jacket slightly, checking his grip on his weapon. The other Kings did the same, not stiff, not rehearsed, just ready in their own way. He looked back at us once. This is where the fun ends, he said. Time to beat it in before they notice we're being polite. And we stepped off the cracked pavement, crossing the lot toward the broken entrance, into a place that had long ago lost its comfort. The air changed the second we stepped under the motel's sagging awning. Hot. Stale. Saturated with the kind of chemical rot that clung to the back of your throat and refused to leave. Every footstep echoed through hollow space, crunching softly over broken glass, old wrappers, a scatter of syringes no one bothered to hide. The hallway stretched ahead, dim and choked with shadow, its carpet long since reduced to ragged strips and stained padding. A flickering bulb at the far end cast a weak, sickly light that trembled like it didn't trust the building to stay standing. Somewhere inside, voices murmured. Not normal conversation. Not panic, either. Just low, drifting mutters punctuated by sharp bursts of laughter that came too quickly, too freely. Rico raised 2 fingers, then pointed toward the rear wing. The Kings shifted without ceremony, falling into place with the kind of instinct you earned by surviving your own streets long enough to learn their moods. Bennett moved closer to me, voice barely above breath. Smells like poor decisions. Smells like Tuesday, I murmured. We advanced slowly, hugging the wall, letting our eyes adjust to the gloom as each door we passed revealed slivers of chaos through cracked frames. A mattress slumped against one wall, stained beyond recognition. A pile of empty inhalers rattled faintly when someone shifted inside a nearby room. Then the sound came clearer. "Hold still, Doc. You keep shaking like that, you'll mess the whole batch up." "I'm trying," a strained voice replied. "If you rush this mixture, it'll become unstable." "Well then don't rush it, baby," another voice chimed in, far too cheerful. "Just keep it slow and sweet, like we like it." A thin giggle followed, then the scrape of metal on glass. Rico halted, raised his fist. He leaned toward the nearest door, the one that vibrated faintly with muffled voices and the clink of equipment. "That's her," he whispered. "Ready?" No one answered. We didn't need to. He stepped back once, then kicked. The door splintered inward with a violent crack, wood slamming hard against the inner wall. For a split second, everything froze. 3 fiends stared back at us, faces lit by the harsh glow of a makeshift burner. Pupils blown wide, expressions twisted somewhere between euphoria and irritation. And in the middle of them, the doctor. Her hands hovered over a cluttered table of stained glassware and unstable chems, her white coat rumpled and soaked with sweat. One fiend stood far too close behind her, his hand still wrapped possessively in her sleeve. "What's this?" one of them slurred, tilting his head. "VIP treatment now?" "Back away from her," Rico said, calm but razor-edged. Slowly, the fiend laughed. "You boys lost? This ain't the Strip." He yanked the doctor closer. That was the mistake. Bennett fired first. The room exploded into chaos. Milo surged forward, slamming one fiend into a splintered dresser. Duke crashed into another, fists and elbows swinging like raw instinct had taken the wheel. The fiend gripping the doctor shoved her aside and lunged for his weapon, and Rico put a round straight into his chest. He collapsed, shock still painted across his face. The doctor stumbled back, gasping, eyes wide with terror and relief. "Get down!" Bennett shouted. I moved in front of her on instinct, covering her, as another fiend staggered toward me with a broken grin and a rusted blade raised loosely in his shaking hand. "You boys picked the wrong room," he hissed. "We were having such a good night." He lunged. Steel flashed. Pain ripped down my forearm as the blade tore through fabric and skin, hot and immediate. My teeth clenched. He laughed. Actually laughed. As if the act of cutting me had pleased him. "You feel that?" he whispered, breath hot, eyes bright with chemical fire. "That's the real stuff." I didn't answer. I fired. His grin vanished as his body slammed backward, collapsing into stained carpet and glass. Around us, the room dissolved into desperate violence. Shouts, gunfire, splintering wood, the doctor scrambling away on trembling legs as Rico caught her under the arm and guided her toward the door. "Out! Now!" he barked. We pushed forward into the hallway again, but the motel had woken up. More voices, more footsteps, more movement. Doors banged open further down as the fiends realized something had invaded their territory, and they were not pleased. The hallway erupted. That thin corridor that had felt tense and waiting just moments before now felt alive. Bodies moving, feet pounding, voices rising into angry, incoherent shouts that overlapped and collided. Doors slammed open as more fiends spilled out, chewing the air with wild grins and weapons held like extensions of their nerves. "Beat it," Milo barked, grabbing the doctor by the shoulder and guiding her down the hall. "Move, Doc, move!" She staggered, but kept her feet, eyes glassy with shock. breath sawing in and out like she couldn't quite tell if she was still alive. Behind us, gunfire cracked in ragged bursts. Fiends fired wildly, rounds punching into walls and chewing plaster into dust. One stumbled forward, tripping over his own feet, laughing even as he raised his gun and fired blindly down the corridor. Duke spun and dropped him with a short, brutal shot that knocked the laughter right out of his throat. "More coming," Rico shouted. "Don't let them box us!" We pushed hard toward the front, forcing our way through smoke and debris as the motel filled with chaos. The air reeked of hot metal, burned chemicals, and old sweat baked into rot. My arm throbbed where the blade had kissed it, blood already warm and slick under my sleeve, but I barely registered it. Adrenaline covered the rest. We burst through the shattered entrance into open night, the sudden cool air hitting my lungs like an ooter. Half relief, half warning. The parking lot was a mess of movement and noise. Fiends poured out after us, shrieking, some firing, others charging with knives and pipes like pain meant nothing anymore. "Over here!" Rico yelled, taking cover near a burned-out sedan. "Keep pushing! Keep pushing!" We fanned out instinctively, finding what little cover the lot offered. Muzzle flashes strobed the darkness as rounds snapped back and forth. The doctor crouched low behind a chunk of broken concrete, hands over her head, shaking but alive. A fiend sprinted straight for her, eyes manic, blade raised high. Bennett moved faster than thought, tackling him sideways and driving him hard onto the pavement. The blade clattered away. The fiend snarled and clawed like an animal, teeth snapping inches from Bennett's face. Bennett ended it with a hard, efficient shot and shoved the body aside without ceremony. "Stay down," he snapped at the doctor. She nodded frantically, too stunned to speak. "Time to beat it," Rico shouted at the rest of us. "We ain't staying here for the encore." We began backing toward the street, firing in controlled bursts, keeping pressure on the advancing fiends just enough to make them hesitate. And for a moment, it felt like it was actually going to work, like we were going to pull it off clean. Then Duke froze mid-step. "Milo!" he yelled, spinning back. I saw it, just as the lot filled with a fresh surge of movement. Milo had been separated, pulled backward by a fiend that burst from behind a wrecked car. They slammed into the motel entrance hard, the fiend's knife flashing as Milo struggled, boots scraping against cracked concrete. "Milo!" Duke lunged instinctively, but another fiend cut him off, swinging wildly and forcing him back into position. "Keep moving," Rico snapped. "We gotta go." Milo's voice cut through the noise, raw and strained. "Don't leave me." For a split second, everything narrowed. The doctor was safe. The exit was clear. The smart move was obvious. And every ounce of training in my body told me to follow it. I hesitated. Just a heartbeat. Then I turned and ran back toward the motel alone. I sprinted back into the lot as the rest of them shouted behind me. "Vance, don't!" Bennett's voice cut through the gunfire, but it was already too late. Milo had slammed against the cracked entrance of the motel, struggling with a fiend twice as frantic as he was skilled. The man clung to him with desperate strength, blade hacking erratically, mouth stretched wide in a grin that looked almost joyful. Milo fought like a cornered animal, fists and elbows driving into the fiend's ribs, boots scraping for purchase. But the chems had turned the man into something relentless. They went down hard. The fiend's knife flashed again and again, carving shallow, violent arcs toward Milo's chest and neck. I didn't shout, didn't warn, didn't hesitate. I closed the distance in a rush, boots pounding over broken concrete. The fiend twisted as he noticed me, grin widening. "More buddies," he hissed, eyes gleaming with manic delight. "Good, good. We'll make it real messy." His knife came at me. Too fast, too close. Pain tore across my arm as the blade sliced through fabric and flesh, burning hot and immediate. My muscles clenched reflexively, teeth bared, breath forcing out a sharp grunt I didn't even recognize as my own. The fiend laughed at the sound. "See? You feelin' it now," he rasped. "You're waking up." I slammed the stock of my rifle into his temple with everything I had. Bone gave way. He staggered, still grinning through shattered teeth, still trying to drag the blade back up toward Milo. That's when I fired. The muzzle flash lit his face white-hot for a fraction of a second, and then he was gone, collapsing into a twitching heap beside Milo. Milo sucked in a harsh breath, rolling onto his side, coughing dirt and spit. "Thought you guys were leaving," he wheezed. "Not today," I muttered, grabbing his collar and hauling him up. Behind me, more fiends surged forward from the lot, shrieking and firing wildly. The rest of the group had formed a ragged defensive line, Duke and Rico laying down covering fire as Bennett shouted for us to move. "Vance, now!" he barked. I shoved Milo ahead of me and turned, firing twice at the charging shapes, breaking their momentum just enough to force a stagger. We ran, boots hammered against concrete. Breath tore at lungs. Shots cracked so close I could feel vibrations in my teeth. My wounded arm burned fiercely with every movement. Blood slick and warm along my sleeve, but adrenaline kept it distant, muffled behind sheer instinct. Milo stumbled once, and I caught him before he could fall again. "You good?" I snapped. "Define good," he panted. "But I'm walking." "That'll do." We burst back toward the street as the others kept retreating, pulling the doctor with them, putting distance between us and the motel's hellscape of movement and noise. A final wave of fiends rushed forward, howling, but Rico and Duke held them off just long enough for us to break free. Shots snapping back and forth until the gap widened and the night finally swallowed the sound. By the time we cleared the block, the gunfire had dulled behind us, replaced by harsh breathing and the rasp of exhausted lungs. We didn't stop running until the motel was nothing but a dark silhouette in the distance. Only then did we slow. Only then did the silence creep in. Bennett turned toward me, eyes flicking down to the blood staining my sleeve. "You went back," he said quietly. I shrugged weakly. Didn't feel like going home short one, idiot. Milo gave a tired, crooked grin. "Appreciate the sentiment, man." Rico glanced at the blood, then at Milo, then back at me. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes before he nodded once. "Guess you ain't as useless as you look." "Hate to ruin your expectations," I replied. We didn't say much after that. Just stood there, catching our breath, letting the noise of the night return to something almost normal. Distant voices, a stray laugh, someone coughing somewhere further down the block. Life continuing like it always did, stubborn and unbothered by the blood still drying on our sleeves. Milo flexed his sore shoulder. The doctor finally managed a shaky laugh that sounded more like relief than humor. Even Rico's posture loosened, just a little. Behind us, the motel still loomed in the distance. Broken, ugly, dangerous. Exactly what it was before we walked in. But it wasn't our problem anymore. Not tonight. We'd done what we came to do. And for once, as Freeside swallowed the sound of distant chaos and the strip's glow crept faintly back into view, it didn't feel like we were just passing through. It felt like we'd left something better than we found it. Not fixed. Just slightly less broken.